Welcome to the Cisco Networking Academy, Cybersecurity Essentials. This is going to be Chapter 3, Protecting Your Data and Privacy. Protecting your data and privacy, we're going to take a look at explain how to protect devices from threats and explain how to safeguard your privacy. So first up, let's take a look at protecting your data. There's things that you can do, there's basics, and you can spend a lot of time obsessing over protecting your computing devices and your data, but it is well worth taking enough time to make sure that you're secure and that you're mitigating or lowering access to your information. So you want to keep the firewall on. You want to prevent unauthorized access to your data or computing devices. You want to keep your firewall up to date, whether you're using a software firewall or a hardware firewall, whether it's an operating system firewall or make sure it's up to date. You want to use antivirus and regularly use anti-spyware software, and there's lots of the different ones out there. There's a lot of recommendations. I'm not going to do a recommendation in this video. During the course that I teach, the cybersecurity, we have a lot of discussion on which one's better cost-wise, which one's good for small businesses, personal use, and then large organizations. But antivirus and anti-spyware prevents unauthorized access to your data. Only download software from trusted websites. You want to check the hash code. You want to check, make sure, double and triple check. A lot of times, if I'm not sure about software, I'll use a virtual machine and I will install the software in there into a virtual machine. I'll check it out, do some virus scans on it, do some spyware scanning on it, make sure it's not installed. I'll look at the system, I'll install the software, and then I'll take a look at the system again to see what was installed to make sure it's safe before I will put it on any production system. And then you also want to make sure that your software is kept up to date. You want to manage your operating system and browser. You want to keep the security settings at medium or higher. You want to use a browser that's secure, more secure. You want to update your computer's operating system and browser and make sure that all of those security settings are in place. Download and install the latest software patches and security patches. You always want to make sure those are up to date. Make sure your browser's up to date. If there are some add-ons or extensions that are trusted for that browser, some of the ones I use are script blockers, ad blockers, privacy blockers, things like that, forcing HTTPS. Those are some of the different things I use on the Firefox browser, primarily as my main browser, just because I believe it's a little more secure. And yes, I am promoting a particular browser. I have no stock in Firefox and I don't make any money off of them. It's just that a browser that I've been using for many years and I trust it. Protect all your devices. You want to make sure that things are password protected. Encrypt your data where necessary. I do not put any data up on shared drives, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive through Microsoft. I don't put any data on there that's sensitive unless it's encrypted. And I use, there's a couple of different programs that you can use, but there's some good ones, and I'm not going to recommend one particular one here just because I want this video to stay fresh. And there may be something better 2 months from now from the time of the recording of this video, but just do some research on your end on what's a good encryption method. And then only store necessary information on in the web or on the cloud. Take things offline. For example, I back up my data. I've got one copy on a USB drive in a fireproof safe. I've got another backup copy that stays in my backpack on me personally, and then the other one, I've got a copy on my laptop and a copy on my desktop, and then I've got my sync data that goes into the cloud, and I keep all of those, and of course passwords are in my I've got passwords to unlock everything in my fireproof safe for my family in case something happened to me. If I died in an accident or fell over from a heart attack, that information is written down in a fireproof safe in my house, so that my wife and some others in my family know where to access that information if they need to decrypt information and get to it. And then you want to make sure that your IoT devices are secured. Your Internet of Things, if you've got a camera on the front of your house, if you've got devices inside your house, if you've got children and you've got the monitoring, the baby monitoring, the cameras and the burglar, those can be hacked into. You want to make sure that those are all secured. Using wireless networks safely, a home wireless network, you want to make sure that you change the preset SSID and the default administrative password on your Wi-Fi router. You also want to disable the SSID broadcast. I know that makes it a little bit harder to do some things. At one point, I had a Ring doorbell I've gotten rid of that since then, and I'm using a different type of doorbell now. But I had my SSID disabled, and I could not get the Ring doorbell to connect to the Wi-Fi until I enabled the SSID, because it was some way they had the Ring doorbell set up. You couldn't connect to the internet. It could not connect to the wireless network manually. You had to have it broadcasting. So I broadcast it, I connected, and then I hit it back again. I disabled it. That just adds an extra layer of protection. It doesn't mean somebody can't find out what the SSID is. It takes me just a few minutes to find out what SSIDs are on a network. A wireless sniffer will do that, but most of the people that are looking are not going to be able to see it. You also want to make sure that you use WPA2 encryption. This recording was as of August 2020. So as of August 2020, that is the current encryption for wireless that works. There may be something 2 months from now that comes out that's better, but for now, WPA2. You want to know that WPA2 protocol, though, does have a security flaw. It allows intruders to break the encryption between wireless routers and clients, so you want to be careful about that and who you allow into your network. You want to use caution when using public Wi-Fi hotspots. Avoid accessing sensitive information. Do not do any banking. Don't use Facebook at all. And sorry, Facebook, but I don't use Facebook. I don't promote it. I just think people should be, as much as I'll get rid of TikTok, get rid of, there's some social medias that are necessary. Facebook to me just doesn't work. But don't access your social media sites. Don't access anything where you have to put in passwords on your browser or in your connection. Use a VPN tunnel. That can prevent some of the eavesdropping, especially if you have a good one that does encryption, because you can turn your VPN tunnel on. I run one on my mobile device when I'm out, and so I turn my VPN on so I know that the connection is encrypted when I go through whoever's Wi-Fi. Also keep in mind that if you're connecting to a Wi-Fi spot at hotels and motels, those particular Wi-Fi hotspots, because of the way you connect, they can see all your traffic. So you want to make sure that you're using a VPN when you connect to those, because they can see that traffic. And if you're sending stuff unencrypted or you're not tunneling, that data is going through their routers before it's going to the main routers, and they can sniff all that traffic and see what's going through there. And you also want to turn off Bluetooth when not in use. I know most people just turn the Bluetooth on. They just run around all day long, but you want to turn it off if you're not using it. I know a lot of people use the Fitbits. They use the Galaxy Bits. They use the smartphones now, and they use the earbuds where the Bluetooth connects, and you've got to have them turned on for that. But if you're just out and walking about in a store, you want to turn that Bluetooth off if you're not using Bluetooth, because it can be hacked if somebody gets up close enough to you. So use unique passwords for each online account. I cannot stress this enough. You never want to use the same password twice, because if you use a password for, and I've had plenty of accounts hacked. If there's a site that you can go on the internet to find out if your email address has been hacked, and there's plenty of them out there on my main email address. And if someone hacks, let's say that someone hacks a social media account and they get your password, and you use that same password for your banking and the same password for multiple social media accounts, they can log in on those other sites and they're going to test it. That bad actors are going to get that information, and they're going to test all the major sites to see where you've logged in. They're going to try to log into Facebook. They're going to try to log into email accounts and try, the main ones, and try to figure out if they can get into your information. You want to use password managers to help with remembering passwords. I use one in particular. I know it's encrypted. There's some people that take it a little bit next step forward, and they do personal hosting with password managers. There's a few different ones out there. I've got recommendations. I'll put one down in the description below of the one that I personally use, that as of the recording of this video, it's the one that I trust. I used LastPass for a number of years. I use Bitwarden now, but I'll put the link down below in the description. Some tips for choosing a good password. I'm going to leave this here. My personal belief on a good password is, if you use something that's over here in this better column right here, if it's, even these can be cracked. My personal belief, and from all the research that I've done, is the longer the better. So if you use something like black cats drink chocolate milk on the moon, even though those are all words, that's a really good password because it's long. And then if you put some haystacking around that, if you stack some characters around that, maybe do every word as uppercase, and maybe put some dollar signs at the front and the back of it, that makes that a really secure password because it's long, it's got uppercase and lowercase, maybe put a number in at some place, and also put some symbols in there, and then you're good to go. And then all you're remembering is a phrase then. Black cats drink milk on the moon. That's pretty easy to remember. And then all you have to do is remember where you capitalized and where you put your code in. And if you're using a password manager, you just get it off there. I personally only know about 3 or 4 passwords, and I've got hundreds of passwords because of my password manager remembers all of those for me. And of course, use multi-factor authentication. Always use multi-factor authentication. There was a bank one. This was about 5 years ago. We were looking at switching banks, my wife and I, and we went to the bank and I wanted to see their security. And I was like, okay, so when I log in, what kind of authentication do you have? What do you have? What? And I was like, how do you know it's me when I log in? Well, you put your username and password in. And I was like, well, do you have authentication? Do you require, at least send a text message to my phone? Well, no, we didn't bank there. We went to a different bank. I mean, we did not choose them based on that fact because I said, if that's that easy to get into an account, I don't want my money at jeopardy. So we went to a different bank that had, at the time, they had text messaging, which was fine, but now they've got multi-factor authentication in place. And this is where we're talking about using a password is better, using a passphrase is better than a password. You choose a long, meaningful statement, add some characters to it, the longer the better, and avoid common or famous statements. For example, 20 years ago is probably not a good one because that could be in a database somewhere. Lyrics from a popular song is not good. It should be some kind of gibberish that doesn't make sense. So black cats drink milk on the moon, or black cats drink Coke on the moon. Would be a good one, or drink Dr. Pepper on the moon, something along those lines. There's some NIST guidelines, 8 characters minimum. I always go 12 or more, and I may be bumping that up soon, but I always try to use at least 8. No more than 64 is really needed, but some I have went longer. My Google password's about 100. Way more than's necessary, but I just did it just to do it, just to see how many characters I could put in there. And I was able to go to 100. I don't know what their length is, but I put 100 in. Make sure that you don't have easily guessed passwords. ABC 123. 12345. Hey, that's the code on my luggage. And if you know what that movie's or what that movie's from, you can leave a comment below on what movie that's from. 12345. Hey, that's the passcode on my luggage. No composition rules such as having to include lowercase and uppercase. Make sure that you do have some uppercase and lowercase. All printing characters and spaces are allowed. No password hints. No periodical or arbitrary password expiration. That's another some guidelines on there. Make sure you encrypt your data. Data can only be read with a secret key or password. You want to prevent unauthorized users from reading the content. And what is encryption? At a very high level of explanation, it's a process of converting the information into a form where the unauthorized party cannot read it. And if you take the more advanced cybersecurity course, we get into what all the cipher keys and all about how we do that with encryption. But for this cybersecurity essentials course, the encryption process goes above and beyond what we're learning. So just, as long as you understand that we are making the data unreadable to anyone other than someone that has the passphrase or keys to unlock it. You also want to make sure that you back up your data. I explained a few minutes ago that in the video that I put a copy of my data in my fireproof safe. I've got a copy that I keep on me, and then a copy on my desktop and a copy on my laptop. That keeps me from losing data. I've lost data before. I've lost some photos before on a computer. I didn't have it properly backed up, and it's painful because you lose that stuff, and there is no way to ever get it back. And so you want to make sure that you have a good backup plan. Make sure that you're backing up regularly. You can do a local backup. I've got multiple drives in my hard drive that I back things up across, or in my desktop computer that I back things up. I've got an external drive. I had a 1 terabyte external drive at one point. I'm thinking about buying a much of a larger one. I still have a 1 terabyte SSD drive that I keep as one of my other backups that I back up about every month or so. And I just plug it into my computer here. I run some backup software. I back up everything that's new and put it on that drive, and then I keep that external. Now, if a fire burned down my house, that drive would be gone, but the backup copy of my fireproof safe would still be there, hopefully. And you can also use cloud services such as Amazon Web Services. You've got all kinds of them out there. You've got the Dropbox. You've got the got the Microsoft service. You've got the Google services. There's all kinds of other services out there. My only comment on that is to make sure that if you're putting any personal data on there, make sure it's encrypted. because you don't know who can see that information when it's in the cloud, or could it ever be stolen? You're just not 100% sure. I'm pretty confident in some of the big companies, but at the same time, when you see some of the things happen with these companies, I just don't trust them. So I encrypt my data that's personal before I put it up on the internet. Now, deleting your data permanently, you want to use some type of tool to delete your data permanently. There's S-Delete. There's some other secure programs out there. I'm not going to recommend one in particular, but there's some. What it will do is it will take your data and it will write multiple passes. It'll take a bunch of zeros and write over the data so it can't be recovered. I have done data recovery off hard drives before, and it's possible to pull data. Even if you've deleted files off a hard drive, someone passed me a USB drive one time and said, hey, I need to recover data off here. It was empty from what Windows was showing me. Was able to plug it into a Linux machine, do some recovery things, and I was able to pull the data back off of it. Well, most of the data back off of it. And then there was another time where I had an old USB drive. I was just trying to check it out. I reformatted it, was still able to pull data off of it. So you want to do some type of secure deletion. And you want to delete your online versions too. What I do for online stuff is I write a copy over it first, or maybe write multiple copies over an online version before I delete it. Because if there's backup versions of that in their system, like let's say that you're using a Google Doc, word processing document, you want to make sure that if there's backup copies of it, that those are deleted as well. Safeguarding your online privacy. We're going to talk about two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Popular online services should be using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. I have it set up on my Google. I have it set up on through my work. When I teach where I teach, they have a system set up where there's two-factor authentication. It's set up on I have to have my cell phone on me, or I have to have my codes, or I have to have a key fob that's got a code on it to be able to put the code in. I have to put my username and password in, and then for a second access, which is where the multi comes in, I have to have some type of physical object, a credit card, ATM card, a phone fob. I also use YubiKey, and I'm not promoting a product. This is not a promotion. This is not an advertisement. This is just a personal opinion. I've been using YubiKey. Go to Yubico. I'll put a link in the description below. Yubico. It's a key, and I need to buy a new one. It's a USB that I plug in, and so when I log into my Bitwarden, and of course now you know what password manager I use, but only 2 physical devices have access to my Bitwarden account because I have that YubiKey, that physical. So you have to have my username and password to get into my password manager, and you also have to have that USB drive. And I'm getting ready to buy a new one that they've just come out with that works for the NFC field. OAuth 2.0. It's an open standard protocol that allows end users' credentials to access third-party applications without exposing the user's passwords. You've used this if you've ever went to log into a site and it says, hey, use your Google login. Hey, use your Facebook login, and to log in. And what that does, it acts as a middleman to decide whether to allow the user access to third-party applications. So what will happen is you go to a web application, you say, I need to gain access and I want to create an account. And it said, okay, well, log in with your, XYZ account. Well, this is XYZ, but ABC account. So it's going to send access data over here, and it's going to say to this OAuth server, and it says, is this person authorized? It's not going to give it a username. It's not going to give it a password. It's just, well, it may give it, I think it might give it the username. But it sends the access data, and it says, does this person have access? You'll see another pop-up screen, and then you have to grant your authentication and your access. If you have multi-factor authentication, that has to be turned, you have to use that. And then it sends the tokens over to this application to say, okay, now you've got access. And so your credentials are still maintained in the OAuth 2.0 server, but you now have access to that third party. I want to talk about not sharing too much on social media. We could spend hours and hours and hours on this. I could give you a lot of different scenarios. The main thing is you want to share as little as possible on social media. Don't share your birth date. Don't share your email address. Don't share your phone number. I always use January 1st, either 1970 or 1980 as a birthday one, because I can remember those dates. I never give out my real birthday online. I never did on Facebook. Even a company I work for would send out a monthly newsletter that says, hey, happy birthday to Jane, Mary, and Sue, and Joe. And their birthdays are, January 10th and January 20th and January 30th this month. and I requested from HR to please remove my name and you can remove it. I don't want my name and birth date out there. I don't even want people in my own company knowing where my birthday was. And I know that, and HR was like, well, why? And I was like, because it's a security. I think it's great that you're doing that with the birthdays. You could just say, hey, this person has a birthday this month. If you want to do that for me and say my birthday's in January, that's fine. It's not, but I just didn't even want that out there. Email addresses, make sure that, don't share your email addresses because those get around. Use burner email addresses or ones that are temporary. And then your phone numbers as well. Don't use phone numbers. I have a Google phone number. So when I'm dealing with somebody that I don't want to give out my cell phone number or I don't want to give out my home phone number, I use a Google phone number that's forwarded to my cell phone number. And then I can access that. So I've got a forward-facing phone number that I can give out for business related, so it doesn't get back to my personal cell phone number. Not that it would probably be too hard to find me, but it's just an extra layer of security. And then you want to check your social media settings. Make sure that you're not sharing too much. For example, if you are on Facebook, create a fake Facebook account and try to log in and see what you can see as a third party. Somebody that's not connected to your circle. See what kind of photos. I tested one time with my brother when I was still back on Facebook, and I was deleting a bunch of stuff, and I was going through all my history, and I'd been using Facebook for a couple of years, and I'd gotten kind of fed up, and I was like, okay, I'm removing everything. I went through my whole history of Facebook, and I thought I had deleted everything. I sent a message to my brother. He checked, and he goes, oh, no, I can still see some of that stuff on there. Facebook was showing me that I had deleted everything, but my brother was still seeing photos. He was still seeing posts that I had made 4 or 5 years earlier on his side, because it did not delete it from his side. It was posts that I had made. He had commented on them, and it was still allowing him to see them. So that was another reason that drove me on over the final edge to never use Facebook ever again, was some of the things like that. It was just kind of shady. So you want to make sure that you check your social media settings. Don't share too much information. Make sure that if you get doxxed, a doxing is when somebody reveals your real information on a social media site. You want to make sure that you don't anger people, that if somebody is going to dox you, that you shut things down pretty quickly if you can. And then we have email and web browser privacy. Email is like sending a postcard. It does track back to you. It's got IP information. You can look in an email header and you can find all kinds of good information in there on someone. Copies of the email can be read by anyone with access to it. The email is passed among several different servers. So if it's not encrypted, if you're not using an encrypted email service, it can be, I use Proton Mail. Again, not an advertisement. I'm not saying go get Proton Mail. It's just a personal one that I use. And then if I want to communicate with somebody else and keep it all encrypted, I make sure that they're on Proton Mail as well, because then I know it's end-to-end encryption. You want to use private browsing mode. You want to use I use Firefox. I use containers to put social media in one container, which makes it look like one browser. And then I put, my banking in another container. And then I put, other stuff that I do for like recording videos with YouTube and YouTube and those, I put those in a different container. But you can also use private mode on most popular browsers, Safari, Firefox, Google Chrome. You can use those, and those are good to use if you don't want somebody to see. Also use a VPN. Use a VPN and then use private. It's not going to completely hide who you are, but it's going to give you some extra layers of security. Okay, so Chapter 3 summary. We looked at explaining how to protect your devices and networks from threats, describe safe procedures from data maintenance, and explain how to safeguard your privacy by using strong authentication methods and practicing safe online behaviors. So for Chapter 2, I hope it was helpful for you. Stay safe and be excellent to each other.